morning, everyone. Well, it is 9:01 and our webinars here, they last until 9:30. So we want to get started, get moving here. We're so pleased to have you and our guests here today. Hopefully you're surviving COVID, and today is going to be a good day for you. Thanks again for joining us. And our topic of discussion today is telecommuting impacts of COVID-19. And for those of us that work in community and economic development, this is a topic we've been watching for some time. However, as it seems that so much of the world has shifted online due to COVID-19, you might be wondering how the trends in teleworking and telecommuting are affecting people and businesses in your community. And our presenters today will be sharing their thoughts on telecommuting and telework. A lot of great data. I'm excited to hear more about it and learn about that. And both of our presenters, just so you know, have been really researching and advising policymakers about this topic for many years and come at this with a very informed perspective. So know that what you're hearing today is really coming from some of the best minds on the topic that we could find. Our presenters are Adil Lari, and he is a Director of Innovative Financing for the State and Local Policy Program at the Humphrey School of Affairs at the University of Minnesota. And our other presenter is Frank Dauma, the Director of the State and Local Policy Program, also at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. And Frank is also a research scholar at the Center for Transportation Studies, also at the University of Minnesota. So Adil and Frank, it's a pleasure to have you here, and thanks so much for being here today. I think we should get started, and let's start by really hearing what can you tell us about where telecommuting patterns were headed before and after the COVID-19 pandemic.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Neil, and thanks to Michael and the Extension for inviting us to be part of this webinar today. We're really pleased to be able to share our work and delighted at the turnout. Telecommuting is something that actually has been around since it was first coined in the 1970s. I got into it when I joined what was then called the telework program at MnDOT in the mid-1990s. And we talked about how people could be productive working from home over a 56K modem. And what we were really interested in is what that would mean from an impact on traffic congestion and travel demand on the system. Interestingly, at that time, Adil was also at MnDOT, and he was involved in a number of projects, but related to this, laying the fiber backbone that is a big part of our broadband network in the state now, in the highway rights of way in parts of the state. As we turned the millennium, technology continued to evolve. The way we got to work didn't change so much, but a number of initiatives had been taking place, and Adil is going to talk about a significant one of those to get started, called eWorkplace, and then we'll move on to how suddenly everybody who could discovered that telecommuting was possible due to technology and public health concerns. So with that as an introduction, I will turn it over to Adil, and he'll just tell me to advance the slides, and away we'll go.
Great. Again, thank you very much. Really appreciate an opportunity to share what we have been doing. So at a state and local policy program at Humphrey School of Public Policy, I had the opportunity to champion and with partners design, brand, implement, Frank next, yeah. Brand, implement, and evaluate the largest and most successful telecommuting initiative in the country, which lasted from 2009 till a couple of years ago. Originally, initiative was funded by the state legislature as a part of urban partnership agreement in the tune of more than $3.2 million. during which we had the significant marketing and education piece, including development of e-workplace website. This initiative later was funded by Metropolitan Council's Congestion Mitigation Initiative for Phase 2 and 3. Driving force behind the initiative was the belief that we do not have to accept traffic congestion and resulting greenhouse emission. Our Phase 1 evaluation, confirmed by independent federal evaluators, that initial $3.2 million investment had a return of 9-to-1. Not many transportation investment have such a high return. It seems Met Council must have known that COVID-19 was coming, as they did not fund our initiative a couple of years ago. Just kidding. We have continued to keep our website alive and study telecommuting. Next. And then the COVID come and the world went remote. There are a great number of studies trying to measure the impact of COVID-19 on workforce and measuring number of employees working from home. As the definitions are very different, it is very difficult to compare the data. But Met Council panel study of last May found that 60% of employees in metropolitan area were commuting versus 26% before. This was 48% full-time workers versus 12% before. Similarly, according to Minneapolis Downtown Council, only 12.2% of 218,000 employees were coming to downtown last summer. That was compared to February of 2020. Google Mobility looks at where the people are going. On October 9th, they estimated that there was 32% reduction in trips to workplace in Minnesota. This was compared to 45% in reduction in trip to workplace in Hennepin County. This is consistent with other studies which found that urban areas are experiencing higher percentage of reduction because of the type of the employment they have. One Federal Reserve Bank study found that 35.2% of the Americans were working from home in May 2020 compared to 8.2% in February. But what is more important and interesting is that only 71.7% of workers that could work from home effectively were doing. So that means there is still possibility of more people to be able to work from home. Next. This has major impact on reliability. Minnesota DOT has their own performance measurements. As you can see, that in 2019, they never met that performance goal, which was 90%. While in 2020, in both of the roads, either interstate or non-state, they have been above those goals. Next. That's other thing was interesting. The traffic volume mostly composed of commuting and discretionary trips. So COVID-19 reduced commuting trips due to work from home as well as unemployment. Michael Acano, he was our research assistant some time ago and now at MnDOT, has tried to calculate the effect of unemployment out of the traffic counts by districts. According to his calculation, Minnesota District 1 and 2, which are northern districts, experience increase in net volumes, while Metro District and the District A, which is in the southwest, experience reduction in travel due to reduction caused by reduction in employment. I believe it reflects significant increase in telecommuting in those two districts. Next. While total VMT has reduced, I'm sure you guys, know that or must have noticed that heavy commercial volume has increased. Must be all the shopping from home. Next. Well, working from home is not for everyone. There's a difference between workers who can work from home by race. Hispanic and Black workers have much lower percentage of jobs which can be done from home, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics. For Asian and white, it is more than 30%, while for Blacks and Hispanic, it is below 20%. Similarly, educational attainment of the worker has significant impact on their ability to work from home. Less than high school, only 4.2, which is more than 11% for the people who have bachelor degree or higher. And probably most of us who are listening to this webinar. There's also a gender difference. According to census, women working full-time year-round are more likely to have a bachelor degree than men, 41.7% to 36.6%, especially workers under age 60. And women hold jobs which can be done at home at higher percentage than men. Women, however, during COVID-19 are dropping out of workforce at higher percentage. It is attributed to reasons like caregiving to elders, child care availability, remote learning of the kids, and believe me not, low priority for workplace at home. Men, kids, and then women in the family get the prime space to work. Well, something never change. Next. But this recession is very different. Current recession is quite different than previous recession of 1990, 2001, and 2008, which impacted the top 25% income earner at the same as the bottom 25% income earner. During this recession, the top 25% whose jobs can be done remotely have bounced back nicely, but bottom 25% working at restaurants, hotels, theme parks, etc., have experienced job losses of more than 20%. Next. So, is this a new normal or not? Nobody knows for sure. Many of people have raised that what happened to Yahoo, Best Buys, and IBM companies, which were forefront of working from home ideas in early 2000s, but changed their flexibility and call employees back to office. Some believe that maybe similarly companies who are in front of work from home now, announcing that they are going to be a permanent work from home, companies will change their tune in a few years from now. Sure, it can happen. But remember, Yahoo, Best Buy, and IBM were facing existential challenges at that time and have brought in new CEOs to save their own companies. And those CEOs were taking drastic actions. But even then, contrary to their public announcements, these companies to many extent kept their job flexibility intact. A great number of companies such as Microsoft, Facebook, and even our hometown company Target has announced work from home till at least middle of 2021. It's only for headquarters. It will be 15 months or more of work from home. Maybe it will become a habit, maybe a new culture. We do not know. What we know that thousands of bank branches are closing for good. Telemedicine is approved for reimbursement by Medicare. Zoom is a verb, and iPhone has 5G. I think it will never be a 2019 anymore. Just last week, Fed chair stated, the pandemic has accelerated existing trends in the economy and society, including the wave of technology, telework, and automation. This will have a lasting effect on how people live and work. Next. It is said, never let a crisis go to waste. System and people have the ability to adapt when they are faced with crisis. These changes, however, are rather short-term, and there are tendencies to revert to status quo when the crisis is over. Disruption, however, provides the window of opportunity to elicit sustainable changes to the system if thoughtful nudges are implemented. Transportation history tells us that the government is very reluctant to and faces strong pressure to restore the status quo. After I-35W bridge collapse and loss of incredibly significant highway capacities, drivers quickly adapted to alternate routes. After the replacement bridge with a larger capacity opened in 14 months, most of the traffic resumed. Things were, however, different during and after 1973 oil embargo. I don't know, many of you know that. I started my career at that time in transportation. That embargo lasted for only 6 months, but effects were rather long-term. Vehicle efficiency effort started, resulting in CAFE standards, which continue to this day. Speed limits were reduced to 55 miles per hour on the interstate, which lasted till 1995. And nationwide carpooling and van pooling was encouraged. This resulted in a reduction in per capita fatalities, highest in the history of the United States, between 73 and 74. And gas consumption were reduced and air quality was improved. I believe that if we want to sustain the transportation and environmental gains caused by COVID-19 crisis, we need to study what changes are happening and understand which of these changes are sustainable. We need to partner with and encourage those individuals and organizations which are already thinking about making long-term changes. We have to strategize how we can encourage others less inclined to make those changes. We have already seen that low-income minority communities of women are disproportionately negatively impacted as they have less ability to change or have limited transportation options. We need to develop policy options so that we do not leave anyone behind and create an even wider gap between have and have not. Frank?
Thanks, Adil. There was a lot in there, but we wanted to keep this on a high level to begin to generate conversation. I think we're only at the beginning of what are the options, the innovations that we can do at an individual level, at a local level, and at a state and federal level to take advantage of some of the opportunities, innovations that have taken place since the beginning of the pandemic that we'd like to retain. But we also need to consider how are we going to address some of these impacts that Adil also mentioned that are showing that not everyone is receiving these benefits on the same level. And in particular, some of those demographic groups that have struggled in the past are continuing to do so, and possibly on a greater scale. So while we're happy to have Neil engage with Q&A with us, also I would encourage folks, if they've got ideas, and I see that Birgit Tuck has already put an answer in there. We would love to see comments put into the chat about your ideas as well. So I'll turn it over to Neil to moderate the discussion, and look forward to hearing from everyone.
Yeah, so people go ahead and feel free to throw in your thoughts or questions into the chat while we're waiting. And
here we are. Seeing that we do have folks joining us from all over the state, and just what are your thoughts on how maybe the smaller communities, regional centers, or maybe the bigger metro centers of the community, how will these patterns continue to play out in those places? Are there opportunities that maybe some of us in the smaller communities might be able to take advantage of, or vice versa for the larger communities?
Well, I can take, I've been seeing it, and actually very interesting. I was reading the other day, then in Hawaii, they are encouraging people to move there as they can work from home. So a lot of people from West Coast are just going there to enjoy the weather, but at the same time can work. So I think that similarly, in greater Minnesota, there's an opportunity for people to encourage the others from metropolitan area to come and stay there.
Yeah, I would agree. The one thing that did not completely happen is just about everyone on this call probably knows, in spite of the efforts in the 1990s to put in that fiber backbone, is that we don't all have the same access to the same high-speed internet throughout the state. I see that Brigitte does point out that she's able to work from home and able to therefore be more active in her own community, instead of having to do a long commute to a larger population area. So if we provide the same opportunity to telecommute, it means that people could decide that they don't need to live in a population center anymore, but can instead be just as productive in a place where they'd rather have their life.
Great. Thanks. I see there's a question here, and maybe you both have some thoughts on this, about the tax disadvantages or advantages of companies providing equipment. How does that work? If you're a teleworker or telecommuter, and does your company provide the equipment? Should they? What are the tax implications for that, if you have any thoughts?
Well, it's my understanding, and it's been a fair while since I've looked at the tax law, that the idea of a tax write-off for office equipment is really if you are in business for yourself. So I think, as the comment suggests, that one incentive could be to broaden that tax incentive, so that if you are working from home, even if you are working for someone else, to be able to have or to be able to help pay for proper office equipment, and maybe the broadband connection, and get a tax a deduction for that, would be one way to help incentivize people to continue to work from home. That's a significant question, I think, that employers need to examine for the long term, is if there are advantages of having their employees not in the office every day. How are they going to ensure that they are making sure that those office setups are good quality, long-term places to work?
Yeah, my son worked for Target, and Target has given them certain amount of monies to be able to work from home. My understanding with the tax law is, I'm not an accountant, is that if they are giving the money for their own purpose, for their own good, if the employees can work from home, and it is their business interest, then it will not be considered as an income. But otherwise, if they are giving it for the benefit of the employee, then it will be considered an income to the employee.
Mm-hmm. We have quite a few questions in the chat box, and just want to try to pull out a few, but I encourage you, Adil and Frank, to take a look and see if there are some that really fit that you'd like to respond to. We do have several folks just really sharing their story about how telework and telecommuting are affecting them and some of their motivations for it. And then we have a question about from Joyce about the disruption in additional working class, lower income employment if people migrate to home. For example, the need for custodial services and building maintenance could be deeply affected. So I would imagine that that's something that has not been a new idea, as as you both have studied this issue for many years, what will we do with all this office space and all the maintenance that is required to keep it up if more people are teleworking? And I'd just like to hear any of your thoughts or reactions to some of those ideas.
There's a disruption. That's one, sure. And there's a lot of jobs will disappear because of this. And like I was saying, that the banks are closing, branches are closing. And so the jobs are losing of the tellers and everything else. But what we have learned over the history, that when the technology changes, there's certain jobs disappear, but there are a lot of other jobs appear. So the biggest issue is the retraining. We need to have a strong initiative for retraining the employees and the people who are losing the job.
And I did see there was one transportation question that came in from Michael. Deal, maybe you wanted to get into this just a little bit more, relating to the MnDOT data showing that the northern Minnesota districts had an increase in VMT. And he wonders if that means they're not telecommuting, or if something else might have been going on that we should pay attention to.
I think that two things are happening. One is that they have very few jobs which can do the telecommuting, with percentage wise. The second is people are traveling there, getting away from metropolitan area and I wasn't not sure a couple of times, and I saw a huge number of people. The parks were full, and actually Google mobility trend also shows that the number of trips to parks has double or triple. So I think people are going to the lakes and people are going on vacations, and that's what there are more travel there.
Well, it looks like we are approaching the 9:30 hour. And I know this is such a big topic that we all would have liked to spend many more hours discussing it and learning about all the data that's available, about the insights that you both have. And so I thank you for your time, and but do know that it was shorter than what maybe some of us would like it. But we can always follow up with you, right? That's something that's possible. For my part, I just want to mention a few things. First, in the chat box, you'll find a Qualtrics evaluation, and there's a link, and that evaluation is really what helps us understand what we should put into these webinars, what sort of topics are interesting to you, and really helps. We'll share that with Adil and Frank, give them a sense of things that they would like to talk more about next time they're on a great webinar. Today, I really learned a lot about, the impacts of telework and the pandemic on transportation congestion. It sounds like that decreased, and air quality maybe has improved. But really, there's these uneven benefits that are being distributed, and the people that are already well off have really just kind of accrued more benefits that they already, maybe were already getting before this. And there's some big questions that I was excited, and I'm interested to think more about what the new normal looks like and how we will address these continued disparities, but also try to keep some of the benefits. So we want to do better, but keep some of the things that have been working. And it looks like from your last slide, there's a lot of questions that researchers and community practitioners and all of us in our society will be thinking about for many years to come to try to understand what has happened and where we go next. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. As is our practice here, we end at 9:30, but then we stay on for a few minutes for anyone that has additional questions or things that they want to chat with us about. So this is the end of our recorded and formal presentation, and we'll stick around for a few more minutes to visit with anyone who'd like to chat more. Thanks again for attending, and look for future webinar notices from us, and enjoy your day.
Thank you.
I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, so, and really appreciate an opportunity to speak to the group.
So Adil, there was a few stacked up in the queue. Like there was one question about the liability. Is there increased liability or aspects for work at home? Like if a first person falls down at home at the workplace?
Good question.
Yeah, I think that's again, like the tax break question, that if we're serious about trying to ensure that we can allow people to continue to work from home over the long term, I think that probably the state or other policy-making bodies will need to kind of be clear about where that liability would lie. And not leave it on a case-by-case basis, because otherwise I'm sure there'll be many employers that will otherwise might have appreciated the benefits of work from home, deciding that they just can't cover that risk, and will tell folks to come back into their ergonomically correct offices, possibly solely for that reason, without clarification on that point.
Companies have basically, when we were encouraging companies to do telecommuting and introduce that initiative, we consulted with more than 100 some companies. Our agreement with the employees had covered that particular issue, that who will be responsible if you will get hurt at work or at home.
Yeah, I think, absent a policy change, that is probably something that employers should consider strongly in terms of making telecommuting long-term, is getting some written agreement between the employers and the employees as to how the arrangement will continue.
There was another question about the disruption to working class, lower income employment sectors such as custodial services, as the need for office, industrial site cleaning. Now, I know at the university, our cleaning people are here. These buildings have never been cleaner because there's hardly anyone here, but they're keeping the maintenance people on staff. But any impact thoughts there?
I saw there was also another question about, when it comes to office supply companies and so forth. As Adil mentioned earlier, things evolve. One option that occurs to me is that some of those services may be more welcome on a more dispersed basis if a company can pivot to delivering coffee supplies to individual locations instead of to offices, or being able to distribute cleaning products, something like that, so that folks can continue to maintain their own space. That might be one way that there'll be a shift in demand. Certainly, we're probably seeing a lot more deliveries happening, and so that there'll be other changes in the ways business is supported in that direction. So we just have to kind of watch those changes.
Good crystal ball question there from Bridget. How long do you think it will be until we have a clearer picture of the long-term effects?
I don't think that will be a switch turned one day or the other. It is a gradual movement, and like anything else, I'm sure some companies will start going back to work first, and then slowly it will happen, and we will know over the time.
Yeah, I think absent another major shock to the system like the pandemic, will probably take a couple years for behaviors to settle into a new pattern, as folks try to figure out what works when they can actually make the choice instead of being told what to do. We're at the Humphrey School just beginning to initiate the conversation about, well, we had to do a lot of steps and we had to make decisions very quickly, and we did the best we could when we decided that we were not going to work in the office. But the decision to move back into the office and how we will relate to each other again on a personal level, and when we do that and how we do that are as significant questions. So we may have a little bit longer time frame for being able to try to develop answers to that, but I think it will take some. Those are big decisions that need to be considered, and if employers or employees believe that it'll be like flipping a switch and let us go back to the office as they did in March or February of 2020, they'll be in for a little bit of re-entry shock that we need to consider and be prepared for, so that folks can continue their level of productivity, even though life will have changed.
And I think it also depends upon what the government do as well. If we do some incentives and nudges and all that in our public policy, it will go a long way.
Those incentives or nudges, what kind of incentives or nudges are they?
But you're talking about the insurance, talking about liability issues and others like this. If we make sure that becomes more easy for the companies and organization and individuals to work from home, I think that will go a long way in that regard.
Yeah, and to build on that, Adil Bailey in the chat, I think she's at the university, but she says that the university has a telecommuting policy in place, and so they make sure they nudge people. You have to have fire detectors, fire extinguishers. You need to have safety procedures built into your home work environment to be approved for the telecommute arrangement. At least that was before the pandemic hit. Then we were all shoved into our homes. But those are the nudges I think you're alluding to.
That's right. And in our website, eworkplacemn.com, we have some sample agreements and all that, which we shared with the businesses. That was before this, obviously, COVID.
Okay, a fun question from Joyce here. You can finish, Frank, but then she's asking, if you were going to be appointed Secretary of Transportation, what would your priority be?
Sure. Well, just to fill in, I think the university's policy was fairly general and kind of deferred down to each individual unit within the university to make decisions as to whether they would require all of that equipment or not. I don't believe it's required by the university, but individual units could say that before we'll let you work from home, we're going to require that. And to just give a quick example for the university, during the pandemic here, the university basically said, we will not approve reimbursements for office furniture, emphasizing how temporary this arrangement is. But if the university wants to make that, or other employers make that a more permanent arrangement, they should probably revisit that policy in terms of how they could support employees getting an office chair that someone's going to be sitting in 200 days a year for X number of years into the future. That would not be my first policy as Secretary of Transportation. As secretary, I would say, well, it looks like for a lot of people, the decision to telecommute worked fairly well, and I don't need to touch that. But for a number of people, they can't telecommute, and their transportation situation is worse. And so we need to look into how can we ensure that we are providing seamless transportation abilities for everybody. And that includes looking for innovative transit options in smaller towns, first mile, last mile connections for people who can't easily access a major transit line. We need to recognize that telecommuting doesn't work for everyone, and our current transportation system before the pandemic did not necessarily work for everyone. And we need to go back to addressing those needs of the most transportation disadvantaged. So if I was secretary, I would be like, well, there's a lot of things the private market is doing well, and I'm not going to get too concerned with advancing that they're doing fine. I need to look at those places where the market is not serving people's needs, and I would put my efforts there. And that would include broadband for people who want to telecommute, but where they live does not have that ability.
I fully agree with Frank. The transportation disadvantaged are really hurt by current COVID-19. And we need to make sure that we make sure that those services are provided to them. And, just for information, the e-workplace and our funding in 2019 came in another great recession. And that's the time the transportation was looking for innovation. And that's what they try to encourage telecommuting.
And we should emphasize again for folks who want to see those policies, so forth that we developed, it's e-workplace, all one word, EWORKPLACEMN.com.
And Frank, I think I got that right.
Yeah.
Is the link in the chat correct?
That's right. It is right.
Okay. Okay. Very good.
Yeah. You can have the dash or you cannot have the dash. They both go to the same place.
Okay. All right. That's good.
And I just want to throw in here, way up high in the chat, our friend Susan Odom from Southern Illinois, from Extension in Southern Illinois, pointing out the kind of the strong linkage, as you alluded to, Adil and Frank, about between broadband connectivity and this ability to telecommute. So I would hope that Secretary of Transportation will be working closely with the broadband people, whoever they are.
Frank talked about our initiative we call Connecting Minnesota. I headed that when I was DOT in 1990s to build a broadband all over the state. And the interesting thing is that all the legacy companies opposed that initiative. 25 years ago, they told the legislature and anybody and went to FCC that they are going to provide. There's no need for another initiative to bring broadband to the greater Minnesota. We are 25 years since, and it has not happened. They went to FCC. I remember spending half of the year at FCC in Washington, trying to convince them that no, what we are trying to do is very, very necessary and very, very important. So yeah, you cannot rely on legacy companies to provide this. The government has to be, and my personal opinion is not to give the money to legacy company, give to the new initiatives, new companies who are able to bring some more innovation in providing the broadband.
And telecommuting, we're in the policy school, so I get excited about policy opportunities, but it is one of those where it's an opportunity for government innovation as well. Because what we're talking about here is not just transportation. This affects economic development. This affects a number of other government areas. And so we'll need to see folks, to again, grab a phrase I remember from the 1990s, bridge across their silos to be able to come up with new ideas that can allow people to get the broadband they need. Is that Department of Commerce? Is it FCC? Is it DOT? Who are the ones that will ensure that we can get this universal broadband access and advance that kind of activity?
Well, I want to thank you both again for joining us and all of our participants today. We had a lot of great questions in the chat, and appreciate that, and also just appreciate everyone taking some time out of their day to think about this issue and think about the things that Adil and Frank shared with us. And I believe that's the time for us to call it a day, and hope y'all go on with the rest of your day and find it enjoyable, healthy, productive. Until next time.